Right, in this video we are going to do a lab that involves us trying to find out some information. So, for example, I'm going to do this one. Is it this one? Yeah, this one. So Portsmouth, we've got an SQL injection cheat sheet, which we're just going to open up anyway. And there's different types. So you've got Oracle, Microsoft, PostgreSQL, MySQL. Each version will have similarities and differences. So the differences, for example, MySQL, you can use that as a comment. If you want to use this as a comment, there needs to be a space after the last dash. If you want to find out the database version, Oracle has to have a from after, whereas these don't. So you need to select a table, and then there's just different sort of query structures, but a lot of them are quite similar. So in this lab, let's open it up. The application has a login function, and the database contents contains a table that holds usernames and passwords. You need to determine the name of this table and the columns it contains, then retrieve the contents of the table to obtain the user name and passwords of all the users. So the first thing we're going to need to do is find out what type of database this is. If it's, well, we know it's not an Oracle one just based on the information that we have, because it says here non-Oracle. So it's either going to be Microsoft PostgreSQL or MySQL. And if you look at this cheat sheet, you can see here to get hold of the database version, it's going to be one of these. So the first thing we need to do is let us open this up in Burp. So it's really turned on. Proxies AC9F. Oh, sorry, wrong one. AC9F. That's a scope. Let's get rid of all of this. Okay, cool, right. So again, we've seen this lots of times. Let's click pets. Sending a query here. Sorry, request for pets, and we're getting 200 OK in the response. Let's send this to repeater so we can have a play. So this request and response is the same as what we did in the browser. We're just going to be working with Burp to make it a little bit easier. So what we want to do is we can just put a single quote just to find out if it is vulnerable, which we get an internal server error, which we've seen before in previous labs, so we know that's fine, so delete that. So the first thing we need to do is we need to find out, just like we have done before, how many columns can be returned. So we need to finish the first query, start our union select, and because we need to, I suppose we can just do it this way. So let's just do one null with a comment. So we get an internal error again. And it renders fine. So we know that there's going to be two columns that we can play with. Now we need to find the database version. So if we come back to our cheat sheet, this is the database version. We know it's not Oracle because we were told that. So it's going to be one of these three. Now, by using this, we're ruling out two versions. It's going to be potentially Microsoft and MySQL because they're the same. So if we create our payload, so we know that there needs to be two columns, we're just going to change one of them to find out the version, which, what's going on here? Let me just bring all this back up. So version was, so that is Microsoft and MySQL. So let's put that in. We still need to leave this one here because remember we need to return two columns, otherwise we get an error. Send. We get the error, so it means that potentially it's not going to be Microsoft and it's not going to be MySQL. So the only other one is PostgreSQL. So let's change this to version. Okay, cool. So we've got a loading screen, which is a good sign. So let's have a look in the content. And you can see down here, we've actually got the version number that's been returned inside this column here. So that'd be the title column. You see it's bold when you compare it with the others. So if we were to change it around, just as an example, we would then, in theory, see this return within a description, so it won't be bold. It won't be bold. So you can see that there. So we know that it's PostgreSQL. So the next thing we need to do is, because we don't know any of the table names, is we need to find out the contents of the database. So we can see down here that we can use select all from information schema.table. So information schema contains basically all the information about the database, and then we're tapping into the section of information schema that contains information about the tables, because first of all we need to find out the name of the table before we can then start trying to find out the name of the columns and then finding out the username and password. Now we're not going to use this all here because we know that there is going to be two columns. So we'll just take this and we'll chuck that in there. So in theory we would need to put null and null. So we need to return two columns. Problem is, if we send that, it's not going to return really anything. So actually, will it return something? Let's see. Let's just see, shall we? I've done that completely wrong. Okay, so it returns nothing. So what we need to do is we need to populate one of these with some information. So we need to tell the database what we want to get hold of from this information schema, because otherwise it's not going to know what we actually want back. So let's go and type in .tables. So we'll click this first one here. Let's score. What one do we want? We want tables. Tables. Okay, so we can see that there's potentially a name of table name. that we could tap into, because at the end of the day that is what we want to actually look for. We want to look for the table name. So let's change one of these to table name and see what we get. Don't really need these side by side now, so let's put that in there and the comment after. So what this is doing is this single quote is closing off the first select query. We're using the union select to create a new one. We're trying to get hold of the table name information. We're adding this extra null because we need to return 2 columns from information schema.tables, which contains all the information about the tables that is held within this database. So if we send that, you can see now we have a list of all the table names here. So we've got all of these. Let's do this because it's too large. So we've got all of these here. Let's capture this. Which one is it? That one. Proxy. Let me just capture it, and then we can see it. Forward, 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 forward. Okay, so this is the actual website now. So you can see all the table names here, and then we still have the results from the first query, and then the rest of the table names. So you'll be looking for something that's users. Users. So this is the only one that's got users in. There's only one result. So let's go ahead and assume it's this. So this is where it's trial and error, because it might not be this. Let's just put that there. Now we found out the table name. So we found out that there's a table called users underscore and then the rest of this. Now what we need to do is we don't know how many columns there are or what the names of the columns are. If it's to do with users, potentially it could be username and password, or it could be users and pass, or it could be anything. So we now need a way of tapping into the column, the information schema that contains information about column names. So if we go back to our cheat sheet, you can see here that there is actually one for information columns. So just like you would do with the table, same method, sorry, with the table, we're just going to do the same but with columns. So if we came back to here and we went back to columns, you can see that there is a name of the column. So we can use column name to return a list of column names for that database, for that table, so the users table. So if we were to say something like, we'll close that off as usual. We would go union select. We still need to return 2 columns, so let's just put null and null just for the minute. Then this time we're going to be tapping into the information schema columns instead, because we want to know information about the columns and not the tables. But this time we have a table name, so we don't want all the information from every single table or every single column, because that will be quite a lot. So we want to narrow it down to where table name, because we already know the table name from this search here, and we know that this is the table name. So where table name equals that. Comment out. So we are now going to change this, because we know based on the documentation that we looked at that we want to grab hold of the column name. So what this is going to do is this is going to close off the initial query, the first query. We're going to go union select. We want to grab hold of the column name. We're still keeping this second column in here as empty, from the information schema that contains information about the columns, but we only want to return information for the set of information where the table name is equal to this. We don't want to, I'm not bothered about finding out information of all these other tables. I don't care what the columns are, but all these other information ones, of what these other ones are. So all I'm interested in is the column names from this table, because we think that that's the one that has the users in. So let's copy that. Let's come back to burp. We'll go back to our repeater, and let's just copy that into here, encode it, and then send. See what we get. So we get a 200. Okay, so that's a good start. Let's. What's this? We've got a password down here. Let's go on render. So we've got this here. So obviously the rest of this is the first query. We've got username underscore MQUTFN, and then another one down here, password. So that potentially means that these two are the column names that we are looking for. So let's grab this, wrong one, and chuck that in there, and chuck this in there as well. So these are the two column names that are held inside this users table. So now we know that, and we can start writing a payload to pull information from these two columns. So we're going to close off the first select query. We go union select username MQUTFN, password RZI, WWI from. So now we need to input the table name, and we know that the table name is this one. Coming out. So this is going to say select these two columns here, the username and the password column, from the table here. Comment out anything else that is after that. So let's come back to here, copy this in, send, and look at that. So it's now showing us the contents of the two columns within the users table, which is administrator this, got Carlos Wiener, and that's it. So I need to request in browser, just so that, because I can't copy here, can't highlight it. So let's open it up in a browser. I'm not typing that password out. Close that, and then let's give it a go. Let's log in my account, administrator, password, and we are in. So this is, I mean, obviously this is still a very basic, simple SQL attack, but this gives you a bit more realism in the sense that you're not really going to have all the information at all. So what we've done here is we've actually managed to find the version, the database version. We've managed, using the information schema tables, we found out the name of the table that we want to attack, and within that, using the information schema columns, we've managed to find out the name of the columns that are held within that table. And then using that, we've been able to use a union to pull the data out of that table. I think this will probably be it for the time being for the SQL. I'll still be doing some others, but I want to try and get some other type of videos out there as well. But yeah, just if you subscribe, then you'll get notified when I do post another SQL video, or if you've got any questions, then feel free to ask.